Hello, everybody, and welcome to Art School Live. Now, you may be confused because usually Eric Rhodes is here introducing this show, but Eric is off on one of his art adventures, and my name is Mandy Theis. I run the School of Atelier Arts, and I am guest hosting Art School Live this week. Some of you may remember me. I did a show with Eric not too long ago on using white in painting. I hope you'll check it out. And today and this week, we have an amazing lineup of amazing, incredible artists for you, as we always do at Art School Live. But today we had a little bit of a mix-up. So you are getting a double whammy. You are getting me as your guest host, and you're getting another demonstration from me today. So today I thought it would be interesting to talk about how we finish a painting, because often on this show, and myself included, we start paintings from the beginning, and we have 45 minutes to rush through them. And then we don't really necessarily get to spend a lot of time on the finishing side of things. So today, what I'm going to do is I'm going to work with you all on a painting that I've been working on in my online class that I teach. And I've taken it to this stage. And what we're going to do is we're going to walk through some processes, some thought processes, and some techniques on how to take this painting up one more level. How do we do a finishing pass on a painting? How do we clean up a painting? And that's really what we're going to be talking about today. So welcome, everybody. I'm so excited to have you here. If you haven't already, make sure that you follow the show, ring the little bell, make sure that you don't miss another great episode of Art School Live. And we're just going to jump right into it today. So
it's Art School Live with Eric Rhodes.
Art School Live with Eric Rhodes / but today with guest host Mandy Theis. So awesome. All right. So as we head into this, I'm just going to rotate the view here so you can see the still life setup as well as myself. And this is a decent painting. This was a several sessions painting in. We blocked it in. We, got our first couple passes of paint down on this canvas. But, there's a big difference between leaving a painting like this and kind of doing one more pass and cleaning some things up a little bit. And so there's a few things and a few techniques that are different about cleaning up a painting that are different from when you are, in your first or second pass in a painting. So one of the first things I want to show you is just the palette that I'm using today. So I'm a big fan of keeping things simple. I like the simplest palette I can find. I try to keep it simple. I'm not one of those people that is likely to have 20,000 colors on my palette. I also really am adamant about systems. So when I'm teaching in my own online class, I make sure that all my students are using a similar system of how they lay their paint out on their palettes. Painting is hard enough to do already. Like, don't make your brain work overtime by putting your paint in a different place every time on your palette, or, having a completely different approach every time you paint. Try to develop systems so that all of your brain power can go to the hard part, which is, of course, teaching, in my case, I'm teaching. You guys are painting, right? So you want to save your brain power for the hard part of painting and not use it all up, starting a new approach every single time. So what we're going to do, this system that I use and that I teach in my online class is I always put my paint from light to dark on my palette. The outside of your palette is for putting your paint down. The inside of your palette is for mixing the colors. And what I like about this system is it doesn't matter what colors you're using that day. It's still the same system, right? So if you go by value, how light or dark your colors are, you can always know exactly which paint goes where on your palette, even if you're using a completely new palette that day. So I just really encourage, I'm not saying this is the only system, the one true system, that if you don't use this system, that you'll never be able to paint well. I'm not saying that. But I am saying that having systems will save you mental energy for your painting. And that I find that this system is nice because it works no matter what you're painting and no matter what pigments you're putting down on your canvas or your palette. As far as my brushes go, I'm not married to any brands necessarily or anything like that, but I do prefer painting with a filbert brush. So a filbert is the type of brush, it's like a flat that is rounded on both ends here. Let me see if I can get it in front of the white so you can see. So, it's flat on top and it's slightly rounded on the edges. I'm a big fan of filberts in particular because I hate washing brushes. I hate it. And anything I can do to use the smallest number of brushes is what I'm going to do. And I find that with a filbert brush, I can get a really fine line. I can fill in some spaces. I find that it's a very versatile brush. So go ahead in the chat, like welcome everybody. Let me know your thoughts. Like what's your palette setup? What's your brush situation? Like how are you working? What are your preferences in the studio? One thing that I love about Art School Live is just how wonderful of a resource this is for all painters to share our information, share our knowledge. And I'm so grateful to be sharing with you all today. Okay, so we have our palettes, we have our brushes. I like using just a simple palette knife to mix, on my palette. And, I want to come up with a plan with all of you about what to tackle. And again, I'm all about systems. When I'm teaching, I'm always teaching systems. And one idea that I think is really useful to people, no matter what level of painting they are, is to always go from the big ideas to the small ideas. And sometimes that's more obvious, right? So when I started this painting, for example, and when I was doing this in my online class, I was starting with the background because it's the biggest amount of space, right? So that's the biggest idea. And then, going from the biggest ideas to the smallest ideas. Well, now that we're in the finishing pass, we have some things that we need to clean up, but which things need cleaning up, first of all, and which ones are the most important, which ones are the biggest ideas, and which ones are the smallest ideas? Because even in a final pass, we want to make sure that we're going from big ideas to small ideas. Again, if you have approaches and systems for your painting, it will save you so much mental energy and give you the best shot at always making your best painting. So I'm systems. You're going to be tired of hearing that word by the time I'm done hosting Art School Live this week. Okay, so one of the big ideas that I'm seeing that really needs cleaned up is this horizon line. All right. Now, horizon lines often, mess up students, and they tend to float around a bit from pass to pass, right? So this is my third or fourth pass on this painting. And, maybe I was working on these rocks or this paper, and, here I was painting over the scissors a little bit. And you can see that our horizon line kind of started meandering, started wandering a little bit around. All right. So there's a few things with the horizon line when you're going to clean it up. All right. All right. So one thing that we want to make sure of is, how sharp is this edge meeting? And then we want to make sure that the horizon line is consistent across. How often do we see a horizon line start over here and then transition lower over here? So I'm getting some questions before we really get into this about what colors are actually on my palette. So I did talk some about going from light to dark, but this is a great question. So let's get through it. All right. Today, I am using a titanium white. For those of you who saw me on Art School Live not too long ago, I was using a different white. I encourage you to check out that video, but today I'm using titanium white. I'm using titanium white because I have such a big space and other white pigments are more expensive. So I don't want to waste them on a background like this. So I'm using titanium white today. Typically, I will actually have a more chromatic yellow than this on my palette. This is a yellow ochre, but I prefer typically to start with the most chromatic colors on my palette because you can always neutralize colors. You can make them less intense, but you can't make a color more intense than it is, right? Like I can't make this yellow ochre into a cadmium yellow no matter what I mix it with, right? So but the reason I'm picking a more neutralized yellow today is because if you look at my subject, the most chromatic yellow in this whole painting is the rock. And it turns out that that rock is not like sunflower yellow. It is very neutralized yellow. So by using a neutralized yellow, I am saving myself some time and energy, not having to neutralize from something more chromatic. I also have a cadmium red on my palette, an ultramarine blue, and an ivory black. Now, some people who really like a simple palette, they'll do what's called a Zorn palette, and they won't have the blue. They'll use the black as a blue. But I have this paper towel in here, and I wouldn't be able to get the chroma, that blue color I needed if I didn't have blue on my palette. All right. So I'm also... okay, I'm also going to pull this in a little bit closer once I start painting just to make sure that you guys can see really well because I don't I don't think you care so much about seeing my face, but I think you care a lot about seeing the painting here. So I'm just going to pull this in a little bit and try to get you as close as I can while we're working on the palette here, or on the painting rather. Okay. So we started talking about this horizon line, and I want to talk about, because I teach online all the time, and, I run an online atelier, and I get this problem all the time with my students where they are really messing with this. Now, I called this a horizon line, and that's kind of a questionable term because technically the horizon line is at your eye height. And you can see on this painting that my eye height is actually quite a bit above. But horizon line is often used in a more common way with a different definition, just meaning where a back plane and a ground plane meet. All right. Now that is technically different from a horizon line if you're talking from a perspectival point of view. But for our purposes, I'm just talking about this line where the ground plane is meeting the back plane here. Now, we also have a front plane meeting the ground plane, right? So just to clarify that we're all using the same language today, because I know that, when you train in different places and you get information from different places, people use different words. It can be very confusing. So today I'm calling this the front plane, what the objects are laying on the ground plane, and the background, the back plane. Okay. And please let me know in the chat, let me know, what do you call it? What are your opinions on the horizon line and calling this horizon line? Are you like a purist, a perspectival purist, being like, no, that's not a horizon line, you can't call it that? Or are you like, it's just a term to help us figure out, what we're talking about here? So I'm curious, because sometimes that can be a heated debate, and I do love a little bit of controversy in the art world. So share your opinions in the chat. Let me know. Okay, so no matter what we call this line, there are some things that we know to be true. This line must continue across the page, right? Often a mistake I see students making is that it'll start here in one place, and then there'll be some objects, and then it'll drop or raise an inch or two on the other side. So I encourage all of you right now, look at your paintings that you have around and look at where your ground plane meets your back plane, and just do a quick double check. You might be surprised and catch yourself having a jump where you didn't intend one. Now, sometimes it'll still read okay, like this one's still reading okay, but there was some adjustment done here around the shape of the tip of the scissors, and it took this background color and kind of cut it in, and it got a little messy here. We don't have a lot of clarity. Now, on one hand, I like that there isn't a really crisp edge right here, because we already have this crisp point of the scissors. And if we also had a really crisp edge from the back plane to the ground plane, it might steal some of the thunder from this point of our scissors, right? So I don't mind that this edge is soft, but I do want to just clean it up a little bit. Like it's kind of like, I don't like this dark color just cutting in here and not transitioning to the lighter color beside it. So I just want to clean it up a little bit. And then also this line is kind of doing a little S shape. It's wavering a little bit there. It's almost like we're seeing it, like if you think of like a desert sands, right, with the heat waves, it almost feels like it has this kind of heat wave effect. And it's doing it a little bit on this side too. So I want to fix that. But whenever, and I tell my students this all the time when I'm teaching them, whenever you go to fix something, make sure you know what parts of it are good that you want to keep, as well as the parts that you want to change. So many times, we'll have students correct one part of their painting, but they'll lose something that was really good in their painting. And so if you are mindful and methodical about how you approach any change you make to a painting, you'll be able to keep the good parts as well as make the parts that aren't working work better, right? Let me know in the chat. Have you ever had this experience where you had a painting going really well, and then you're like, oh, I'm just going to make this one change, and then before you know it, your whole painting fell apart? Has that happened to you? It's okay if you don't want to admit it. You can just type in the chat, I don't want to admit that, Mandy. I don't know you well enough to disclose those types of art whoopsies with you. But it's happened to me, and it still happens to me. I've been painting professionally for a decade, and it still happens to me. So anyways, I want to keep the fact that it's reading cleanly across. I don't want to keep kind of this awkward up and down effect. So I want to get rid of that, but I do want to keep the softness of the edge. If I make this back edge between the back plane and the ground plane really crisp and sharp, it's going to compete with the other parts of my painting. Now, maybe some of you would want that to be true. Maybe you want it crisp because it's an important part of your painting for one reason or another. But in my painting, I want to keep the focus on the rock, paper, scissors, right? Oh, by the way, who here knew what this was before I told you? Did anybody get it? I wish I'd asked before I just gave it away. Okay, so let me know in the chat if you got it before I gave it away. Okay, so we have some, I want to keep the softness of the edge. I want to keep the unifying from left to right, but I do just want to clean up a little bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mix some background color and some of my ground plane color. And I'm going to do this with my palette knife. One little other studio trick that I really like, I love these blue automotive paper towels. I find them really useful. It's really important to me, especially because I do tend to paint with some pigments that are known to not be as nice, like lead white. If you saw the show that I did on white with Art School Live not too long ago. And just so you know, warning, Art School Live nor 𝗙𝗶𝘶𝗵 Arts, my school is responsible. You are completely responsible if you choose to use whatever pigments you choose. We are not responsible. Make an informed decision, do your own research. However, I find that it's really important to me because I do choose to use lead white, that I never get it on my hands because you don't want to eat it. The main danger is eating it, is my understanding, my best understanding. So if you have a paper towel, if you're using regular paper towels or even sometimes the cotton rags, the pigment soaks through them and can get on your hands, and then you're not paying attention. You drink some coffee or something, and then the next thing you know, you're getting lead into your system. So I like these blue automotive paper towels because they tend not to soak through. I like to kind of fold it up like this, and I kind of pinch it. Sorry, I'm holding all the things. I like to pinch it in my hand like this, and that way I can just wipe my blade like this. I try as much as possible to not have to put things down, pick things up, right? I want everything all in one place. I want everything to be easy to get to. And I want to have the least disruptions between my brain and putting paint on the canvas, right? I don't want to have to think about this or that or moving stuff over here or changing hands or whatever it is. All right, that's just me, but that's my system. All right, so when I'm going to correct some things, I just put my best guess down. I know I'm going to need some of this color and some of this color. So I'm just going to go ahead and mix an approximation of each of these. Now, every color has a value, a chroma, and a hue. And both of these colors are what we'd consider pretty neutralized. So they're not an intense color. It's not like a stop sign red or a lemon yellow. It's a very neutralized kind of grayish color. There's lots of ways to get a neutral paint. My favorite type of neutral sounds insane, and it's called a chromatic neutral. So what I like to do is I like to mix some yellow, red, and blue together on my palette with a little bit of white to make a neutral. Now, you don't have to add white, but I'll show you why I do in a second here. So if I take some yellow, and my yellow is my least strong pigment, so I'm going to use more of that, a little bit of red, and the smallest amount of blue because it's my strongest pigment of these three. And I'm going to mix these together. Now, you might notice that overall, this is kind of an orangey color right now. So if I'm trying to mix a neutral and it's coming out orange, what I need to do is add the opposite of orange on the color wheel. Does anybody know what that is? Let me know in the chat. The opposite of orange on the color wheel. If I'm trying to get this neutral to not read as an orange, if I want it to read as a true neutral, I need to add the opposite of orange, which hopefully we have some correct answers now in the chat. All right. So I'm hoping, I can't see the chat at the moment, but I'm hoping some of you said blue because that's the opposite of orange. All right. So the idea is that we want this to be a gray that's not a blue gray or a green gray or an orange gray. We want to mix a neutral that just doesn't feel like any color because that's what a true neutral is. So we're still a touch on the orange side. So I'm going to add a little bit more blue. I was too conservative with my blue. I was afraid of polluting it too much. Okay, so we're getting a little closer to a neutral, but it's actually really hard to see how neutral a paint color is when it's dark in value. So the lighter a color is or the darker a color is, the more difficult it is to actually see its chroma and hue. So what I like to do is I like to just add a little bit of white because it makes it more obvious what the color is. So I'm going to mix some white into my pile of neutral to evaluate how neutral it actually is. And this is feeling pretty good to me. This is a pretty decent neutral-ish color. It's a slightly warm neutral, but that's okay. We can cool it if we need to. Okay, so I took the most chromatic colors on my palette and I turned them into a neutral, and that's what a chromatic neutral does. Now, I like doing it this way, having a pile of neutral on my palette, because then let's say I need a yellow, but I need to neutralize it. All I have to do is take my yellow and take a little bit of my neutral, mix it together, and now I have a neutralized yellow, right? I feel like having a neutral mixed up on your palette is one of the most underrated, like sneaky tricks that you can do as a painter. All right, so I'm gonna put my neutralized yellow up there for now. Okay, so I also need a darker neutral and a lighter neutral. So, and both of these are a little cooler than what I have it. So I'm going to mix in just a teeny tiniest bit more blue, a little bit more white because I need a lighter neutral here. So do you see how we're not just going in like a 𝗙𝗶𝘶𝗵, right? We're like, oh, I have to fix this horizon line. And you're not thinking about it and you just like go in and attack. We've done a lot of thinking before we touch the paint so that when we make this correction, we can hopefully make it the right correction the first time with the least amount of emotional pain. You know, painting really is an emotional process. I'm sure many of you know that, right? You don't start following Eric Rhodes, you know, in the Art School Live if you aren't interested in painting, right? So presumably you are all interested in painting to some degree, and I'm guessing, I don't want to put words in anybody's mouth, but I'm guessing everybody's had at least one very painful painting experience, right? That was a little bit emotional. Maybe we, you know, went out to our car and cried while we were training in an atelier, or, you know, maybe we were following along with our favorite artist and went awry somewhere and it really, it got deep, you know? But one way to set yourself up for success and to not have those devastating moments is to plan and be methodical in your approach. All right, so I also need some of this color and I need to cool that. So I have my light neutral here. I'm going to mix a little bit of more blue into this neutral just to cool it down a little bit. And it also needs to be a touch lighter. So I'm going to add just a little bit of my titanium white to that as well. All right, and that's feeling pretty close, but remember that we are painting as if we didn't have enough problems, right? All we're trying to do is fix this horizon line, and I've been talking to you all for 20 minutes now, and we haven't even put paint down to fix this, right? It's because there's just so much to think about. There's so much to consider. And one more consideration we have to make is that this is a dry painting. And some of you may have experienced this. Let me know in the chat if this has happened to you. You mix up a color and you match it to the dry painting, and then that color dries, but it doesn't look the same as the background, right? Does that happen to you? It happens to all of us, right? So we have to be mindful that not only are we trying to fix this area, but whatever paint we need put down, we need to knit into what's already down there. We want to lay it down in a way where it'll blend in with the background when it's dry, right? So we have to anticipate that it's going to look different when it's dry. And we want to do our best to make sure that we don't just have new lines that need fixed in the background. Now, some people will insist on repainting the entire background on a finishing pass for this reason, to make sure that they can unify the background. I hate doing that. That's not my, that's my least favorite part of a painting. And so I don't want to repaint the whole background. So I've kind of developed a technique where I will work on the area that needs working, and then I will kind of knit it into what's already there. And I'll show you how I do that. So let me know in the chat, has it happened to you? You fix an area and then it dries, and then you're like, crap, it looks, now there's lines that I didn't think were there when I was painting it. And now I have to go fix those. And then the next thing you know, you've repainted the whole background. Okay, I'm going to just test my colors here. So this is my best guess of a color. I'm just going to put it down, and it's a little bit dark. I can tell that it's a little bit dark there. So I'm going to make it bigger just so you guys can see more easily. I'll paint a bigger area. Do you see how that's too dark for that space? So I'm going to add a little bit of titanium white into that color and lighten it up a little bit. All right, so that's getting a little bit closer, but it still needs to be a touch lighter in this area here. Okay, I think it still needs to be even a little bit lighter. Okay, so I'm painting a slightly bigger area than I normally would, you know, because this is a demonstration and I want to make sure you can see. It's also a tiny, tiny bit warm, just the tiniest bit warm than what it was before. So I'm going to take the tiniest bit of blue and kind of weave that in there a little bit. Okay, so again, I have this color match. That's pretty good. Now I'm going to test the top color and see how close we are with the top color. So, all right. So the value, how light or dark it is okay of a match, but it's too warm. This is more red, and underneath it is more purple. So if I want something that is red to be more purple, I need to add blue. All right. And don't be shy about asking questions. You know, if I'm doing anything that you're like, Mandy, what is that? Oh, here's another little trick. So blue is a really potent pigment, right? And oftentimes students, they're like, oh, I just need to add a little bit of blue, and then they add way too much and it ruins their color. So you can see that I've kind of made a little strip of blue, just a tiny thin little bead, and that allows me to dip just the tip of my brush, you know, like into that little portion. So instead of putting it into the big pile, I kind of pulled just a tiny bit. Here, I'll show you again with when I was laying this blue out, I took my knife and just, you know, took a little trail of blue off to the side like that. And that allows you, oh, did you see what I just did? I hit my blue brush against here. Now we have more things to fix. Okay. We're going on a tangent now. So underneath here is dry. So one technique you can attempt first is to just wipe it. You know, if you get paint where you didn't want it, you can wipe it off. And again, because this is fairly dry, I could even put a little bit of 𝗙𝗵𝗀𝗆 or terps on my rag to get it off. But considering I've already mixed up this color approximately, I can also just add it to the list of things that I'm going to mend. But I don't want to get distracted down here or spend too much time being distracted down here when I'm trying to work on this problem first. But we're going to have to come back in here and fix this problem next. So, you know, painting sometimes is 2 steps forward, 1 step back. All right. I said I was going to wait and be patient, but it's making me crazy. And I don't feel very patient right now. So I'm just going to fix this. All right. Now, that's a patch, but what I just put down is going to dry differently from what's under it. So I'm going to have to come back in here and knit it together, but I'm going to do that once I show you that technique up here where we started. This still needs more blue. and even a little bit of black. Now, ivory black is a very dark value blue, and it's more neutral than my ultramarine blue. So sometimes if I really need to get something cooled down, adding the black to it is the easier add. Okay, so essentially what I'm trying to do now is to get some wet paint on the top and some wet paint on the bottom, and then I'm going to start pushing and pulling them kind of across that line. Now, I can pull it, I think I'm going to pull it all the way in and just kind of redefine these rocks a little bit, because otherwise I'm going to get a weird color change in there. But I want to be careful that I don't overpaint, because then the rocks will look like they're behind the background instead of in front of the background. All right, and then I'm going again from the light side. Oops, that's too light. That's too warm. You know, I'm really surprised by how cool this neutral is, because it looked not that cool to me when I was mixing the color, but as I'm actually laying it down on the canvas, I can see that it's quite cool. All right, so I've basically refound this color and this color, and now I'm going to just start pushing and pulling it. I do want to keep a soft edge, but I also want to keep this line reading cleanly across the top. Now, what a lot of students are tempted to do here, and what I do not recommend, is they'll start painting horizontally here and horizontally down here. And that's bad for a couple of reasons. First of all, it's going to give you a ridge line of paint that's going to catch the light, and it's going to become a really important part of your painting, even if you didn't want it to. The other reason is that you get this textured stripe going here, whereas the whole rest of your painting doesn't have that horizontal striping on it, and it really stands out. Okay, so I'm going to, oh, and I still need to cool that. All right, so I'm going to bring down the dark a little bit, and then I'm going to bring up the light. Now, sometimes when you have a line, we're pseudo calling this a horizon line, even though technically it's not. If you have a sharp edge between the back plane and the ground plane, and then it's meeting an object, do you see how it's creating a point here? And that can sometimes become more important than your subject itself. And so whenever this is meeting this, which is meeting an object, I do something that's called passage, which is just a word for dissolving the line a little bit as it approaches an object. And I'm going to do that now to kind of show you what that looks like. All right. So I just don't want that part of my painting to feel so sharp. I want the rock to be the important part, not where it's meeting. So I'm going to push and pull this a little bit too, you know, because I don't want the white to come up too high, or sorry, rather the lighter color to come up too high. But I just want it to dissolve a little bit as it approaches that rock. I don't want to create a point there. All right. Now, as I've been making my corrections, I want to make sure that I'm still thinking all the way across. Does that still make sense? If I stand back really far, that's a good way to kind of double check it. I feel like I want to make this just a little bit softer of a transition here still. So it's like I want it to read as a line, but also get really, really soft as it approaches that rock. And sometimes that's the challenge of a painter. How do you make something look hard and soft at the same time? And often it comes down to edge work, just creating a really soft transition. Oops. Okay, so it's reading straight. I have that transition, that passage in there. But now I have another problem because I put this color down and I can tell already it's slightly different from the color behind it. So I'm going to go to a slightly bigger brush because I have a bigger area to knit together. If I use a tiny brush, the brush strokes under it are from a bigger brush. And so that's also going to create some dissonance on your eye if you're leaving some texture of the brush strokes. Now, some artists love painting like super smooth. They're never going to, leave strokes behind. But I am not that kind of painter. And so I need to be mindful of matching the size of my strokes if I go back into an area. All right. So what I'm going to do, it's a little too light, is I'm using what it's called a basket weaving technique, where I'm just kind of going in different directions and just trying to weave it in with what was behind it so that it makes a smooth transition, so that when it dries, it doesn't feel so jarring, that it feels like it belongs with the rest of the painting. Okay. All right, I'm also seeing just a little bit of the canvas peek through on the edge of this rock. And because I have this color already mixed on my palette, it's a good time to kind of clean that up a little bit. I'm just giving that a crisper edge. And I don't mind that this has this crisp edge because it's a rock and it's kind of a really important part of the rock, paper, scissors, right? As part of the story of this painting. Okay, so now I'm going to do the same thing on this side. And we have another similar problem here. If I want the point of the scissors to be the important part, what I don't want to do is have this background and ground plane creating another point here. So I still need a soft edge, but I need to clean this up a little bit. This is just feeling messy and sloppy to me. All right, so I'm going to put down a color, and that feels pretty close. It's a little bit too light. All right, and I'm just going to first clean up the edge of the scissor. And remember that cleaning up a painting is a push-pull prospect, right? So we're going to probably end up bringing in a little bit and then taking away, like going from both sides. While trying also not to overpaint the scissors so that we don't have to paint them yet again, right? So we want to keep the good work and just make slight adjustments where needed without creating more work for ourselves. Right, and it looks like I bent the blade just the tiniest bit. So I'm actually gonna have to go in with that dark color. Now, don't think that this is black. This is not a pure black. There's almost never a pure black. And remember that black is not a color. Black is a really, really dark value, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, purple. And in this case, these scissors are a really dark red. So what I'm gonna do to correct the scissors that I just overpainted is I'm going to mix some red with black. And I'm just going to reestablish this point. And now I'm getting into some dangerous territory, right? Because I am painting dark on top of light. So what I do, when you're pushing and pulling, you have to be careful because now that black is going to pollute your brush. And your white is going to pollute your black. All right, now we're too sharp. When I started, this felt like it wasn't sharp enough. Now it's feeling a little too sharp, so I'm just going to try to soften it just a little bit on the end there. Okay, so sometimes these are the little adjustments that make the difference between, you know, a highly finished piece versus a study, right? And see, I just sharpened it too much again. I'm going to go back. Okay, that's feeling better. So anytime you make an adjustment, remember it's not just the lines from left to right that matter. It's this line, right? So there was a period of time just now when I was adjusting this blade that this line no longer made sense, right? So whenever you're thinking about one area of the painting, it still has to make sure, you still have to make sure that it goes with all the rest of your painting. Oh my goodness, I can't believe that we are almost out of time and I've only done one line. But I guess I hope that what you've learned from this is how to go back into a dry painting, how to knit things together in a dry painting, how to be methodical in your approach to making corrections on a dry painting, because it's a skill that we often don't see in demonstrations, right? It's often, you know, we see the beginning a lot and we rarely see the end. And so I'm really hoping that seeing how we can make these subtle adjustments at the end without ruining all the good work we've done is useful for all of you today. So let me know in the chat, have you ever struggled with kind of, you see one thing that's wrong with your painting and you go in and fix it and then you accidentally mess up your whole painting? If that's happened to you, let me know. All right. I'm going to go ahead, and we only have a couple more minutes here, so I'm going to try to match this cooler dark area. And it looks like I might need just a touch of the black in here. And my bigger brush. Remember, if you're trying to match something that you painted with a bigger brush, use a bigger brush to match it. Otherwise, it's going to look like you patched it over. So we're trying to do our best to not let anybody see that we've been patching things. And you also want to make sure that you're weaving whatever you do, you know, to what's around it, because you don't want that surprise when it dries where it looks like it was a completely different part of your painting. All right, and I'm also trying to fix this wavy mirage line while still making it read as part of this other line. And so which one's the true one? Because I now have two heights. And so it looks like the top one needs to come down and the bottom one needs to come up slightly. Sometimes students are like, oh, I know the answer is the left side comes down. Well, maybe that's true, but often it's a little bit from both sides. And that is sometimes a solution that students don't think about at first. Now I'm doing that thing I told you not to do, right? That horizontal thing. And do you see how it's starting to create a really crisp horizontal brush stroke? So I want to make sure to weave that stroke away so that it doesn't catch light. And I also want to bring up this slightly. So here's another tip is paint your horizontal line with vertical strokes. That keeps it from giving you that horizontal streak. And it gives the softness to the edge, which is sometimes hard to achieve in other ways. So I'm literally painting vertically. I'm painting a horizontal line with little vertical strokes here. Okay, and now it looks like there's a slight bowing here. So I just want to pull the top down slightly. Again, I'm using that vertical stroke approach. There we go. That feels much better. This is feeling bowed a little bit on this side, so I'm going to make the same adjustment using a vertical stroke here. And again, trying to knit it into what's around it. It still feels like it's bowing upwards just the tiniest little bit. I really encourage you, you can see me leaning way back. I really encourage you when you're working on a horizon line to step way, way back when you can, because distance will give you the truth. Okay. All right, that's feeling much, much better. Okay, I am afraid, my friends, that we are nearly out of time today. I want to thank all of you for coming here, and I have some awesome treats that Eric left for you as well. So let's see here. Okay, so I have a gift for you from Eric 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏, and you can download the free video 97 Incredible Art Secrets. So if you go to 97artsecrets.com/ASL, you can download this amazing free gift. It has so many amazing tips and tricks from so many different realist artists in our world. It's incredible. And also, make sure that you register for Realism Live. It's one of the neatest events in the online world for realism skills, realism training. You get to work with and see many incredible artists that are at the top of their game. And there are many forms of realism. For instance, you know, some people paint impressionist paintings and others are drawing tight, realistic subjects. And Realism Live is a 3-day virtual event with an optional essential techniques day that contains art instruction demonstrations, talks on art principles, lectures on art history, painting critiques, and artist roundtable discussions. It includes all styles of realism, painting mediums, and subjects from figure, portrait, still life, landscape, floral, and more. And you can learn more at realismlive.com. Please, everybody, make sure to subscribe to this channel, Art School Live on YouTube and at Eric Rhodes on Instagram. And if you enjoyed my teaching style today, I hope you'll check out my own online art school at 𝗙𝗶𝘁𝗶𝘆arts.com. And you can follow me on Instagram at Mandy Fine Artist. And I hope that you'll consider going to 𝗙𝗶𝘁𝗶𝘆arts.com. I have a free color theory class there that you can sign up for on the front page. And I hope you'll check it out. So thank you all so very much for being here today. Thank you for allowing me to do my best to fill these amazing shoes, these big shoes that Eric Rhodes left behind. It's such an honor to be here. And it's always such a joy to paint with people who love painting and love realism. And I'm so grateful to have this opportunity to share my skills with you today and also get such great energy from all of you. It's been a wonderful experience. And I can't wait to see you tomorrow with our next special guest artist.